A comparison of messaging tactics. Atheists, evolutionists, and Catholic priests in academic control. Throughout history, various groups have sought to control narratives to preserve their authority. While the Catholic Church historically regulated theological discussions, modern atheists and evolutionists exercise similar control in academic settings. This essay argues that both groups employ parallel tactics: silencing dissent, appealing to authority, controlling access to educational platforms, and enforcing conformity through social pressure. 1. Silencing dissent and marginalization. Just as the Catholic Church labeled dissenters as heretics, atheists and evolutionists suppress those who question Darwinian evolution or advocate intelligent design, ID. Cases highlighted in the documentary Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed show how scientists and journalists lost their jobs for merely acknowledging ID as a legitimate field of inquiry. For example, Richard Sternberg, an evolutionary biologist, faced professional harassment after approving the publication of a peer-reviewed article on ID. This treatment mirrors how religious authorities historically marginalized heretical views to maintain orthodoxy. Pamela Winnick, a journalist, similarly faced backlash for reporting on ID without criticizing it. She was dismissed even though she neither endorsed nor promoted ID. An example of how even neutrality is punished when it threatens the dominant narrative in academia. These cases reflect a pattern of gatekeeping that resembles the Church's control over theological debates, ensuring only approved ideas gain legitimacy in the public sphere. 2. Appealing to authority and establishing orthodoxy. Both the Church and modern atheists, evolutionists, rely on appeals to authority. Catholic priests invoked the Church's divine authority to silence opposition, while today's atheists appeal to the authority of scientific consensus. However, as shown in Expelled, the so-called consensus often serves more as a tool of exclusion than genuine inquiry. Evolutionary biologists, such as Richard Dawkins, defend their positions by dismissing alternatives as pseudoscience without meaningful engagement, just as the Church dismissed theological challenges with declarations of heresy. The philosopher Richard Lewontin candidly admitted that materialist scientists exclude any divine foot in the door, illustrating how personal philosophical biases shape what is considered acceptable science. This bias reflects an unwillingness to entertain alternatives, akin to religious orthodoxy. 3. Controlling access to platforms and curriculum. The Catholic Church historically controlled access to education, limiting discussions to church-sanctioned views. Similarly, modern evolutionists control academic curricula and platforms, excluding non-materialistic explanations like ID. Public schools, for instance, teach evolution exclusively, while philosophical discussions about ID are confined to fringe outlets. This gatekeeping ensures that students encounter only one explanatory framework, much as medieval scholars were exposed only to church-approved doctrines. The exclusion of ID from mainstream journals further highlights this pattern. Even though ID proponents, such as Stephen Meyer and Michael Behe, provide peer-reviewed research, their work is often rejected or retracted due to ideological opposition rather than scientific merit. This resembles how the Church once censored texts that challenged its teachings to maintain control over knowledge. 4. Enforcing conformity through social pressure. Both groups also enforce conformity through social pressure. The Church used threats of excommunication and eternal damnation to maintain control, while today academics face professional ostracism for challenging Darwinian orthodoxy. In Expelled, scientists describe how colleagues who even entertained the possibility of ID were blacklisted or labeled intellectual terrorists. This social pressure discourages independent thinking and fosters a culture of conformity. Much like the Church's enforcement of doctrinal purity, the academic establishment punishes dissenters to safeguard its narrative. As philosopher Michael Shermer remarked, such control mechanisms create ideological walls to protect scientific materialism from alternative perspectives, regardless of the merit of those alternatives. Conclusion. The parallels between the tactics used by the Catholic Church and those employed by modern atheists and evolutionists reveal a shared desire for narrative control. Both groups use similar methods: silencing dissent, appealing to authority, controlling educational platforms, and enforcing conformity through social pressure. While their worldviews differ, their strategies for maintaining influence are strikingly similar. For academia to foster genuine inquiry, it must allow for open discussions across worldviews, including alternatives to Darwinian evolution. Only by embracing diverse perspectives can the intellectual community avoid becoming a modern-day orthodoxy, indistinguishable from the religious monopolies of the past.